Hello and welcome back to the Nonstop Podcast. My name is Erica and I'm your host. On today's episode, I actually brought one of my best friends to the show. Her name is Kristin, and we're going to discuss setting boundaries with friends while traveling. Nonstop is a lifestyle and travel podcast that focuses on the importance of traveling and mental wellness for millennial women. We discuss everything from travel to dating and careers to mental health. The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for entertainment purposes only. Welcome back to the Nonstop Podcast. Today, I have the beautiful Kristin with me, and we are going to talk about setting boundaries with friends while traveling. All right, so let's get into it. Kristin, can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Well, as you said, I'm Kristin. We've known each other for like 6-ish years. We worked together at the airline. We were roommates in initial training.
And that is where we met.
Yeah, I'm so grateful that we were roommates. It made things so much better.
It did. Yes, it did.
Yeah, and then we've kept in touch since. I still fly, and I also work at a restaurant on some of my days off. Days off.
Yeah, exactly. Air quotes for anybody who couldn't see that.
Yep. And love traveling. I think each of us is moving into slightly different roles in our flying, and we're excited about that. And so even more and bigger adventures ahead, I think.
Yes, and I'm super excited. We both became international pursers within the last month, right?
Yeah.
So we out here doing it, y'all. We trying to see some new things, get that money.
Paris, first class, international.
Hey. For anybody who doesn't know what that is, tell them where that's from.
It's from, I think it's View from the Top. I think
yes,
it's what it's called. It's the Gwyneth Paltrow movie where she's a flight attendant.
Yes.
And in training, that's what becomes one of her mantras, where she's just like, that's what's going to get her through. She just has to make it until she is working Paris, first class, international.
Love it. And it's real. I love that.
So
it's a lot of fun. And we are getting there. And I want her, as soon as she goes Paris, international person, I need you to take pictures and everything.
I will. Yeah, right back at you. Yeah.
All right, perfect. So let's go ahead and get into the juicy stuff here. So how do you approach boundaries in general?
Good question. I think there's a couple ways. I feel like most of the time when I'm thinking or addressing boundaries, it's almost like an energetic standard that I have. It's not always like a spoken thing where this is okay and this isn't okay.
Yeah.
It's just sort of like getting really clear with yourself about what feels appropriate to you and deciding that you're not really available for anything other than that. And so I don't feel like I get a lot of people who challenge me in things that I'm really clear on.
Yeah.
It's in areas where I'm like, ooh, I'm not sure, or, maybe I don't feel maybe worthy of whatever thing. And then it starts to be like, okay, kind of blurred. And then I have to again come back to myself and internally what feels appropriate, and just deciding that. There are times when you have to talk about your boundaries.
Yeah.
And the best times to do that are when you can be I think a little bit emotionally removed from the situation. It's hard in the moment to feel
I understand that. Yeah.
This is okay and this isn't okay. It's sometimes easier to go back and be like, hey, when this happened.
About yeah, for sure. And I think that probably tends to happen to a lot of people just in general, where I think sometimes, even myself, I'm not really sure the right words to say in the moment, or, I feel like, and kind of going back to what you said, just the emotional part of it. I'm like, oh, okay, maybe this isn't the right time because I'm a little upset, or I'm a little annoyed. Right. Let me come back. So I get that 100%.
Yeah. So it's just, that little pause of okay, let me regroup, figure out sometimes it's even hard to pinpoint what maybe the violation is.
Yes.
You're just like, oh, this doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure why. And so then you kind of have to step back and be like, oh, this is what's coming up for me. This is kind of what maybe what's being triggered. And then, okay, now this is how I want to go forward.
That makes sense. Okay, so I guess kind of into that question, when do you start that conversation? Is it more so when you meet somebody, when I'm just discussing boundaries in general, when you kind of meet somebody, or when the actual experiences happen? When do you kind of start the discussion about certain boundaries?
Well, I think, when you're first meeting someone, you're each kind of feeling each other out, and there's not always like a specific, we're talking about these. Sometimes boundaries can be simple things. I don't want to be late. It's important to me to not be late. That could be a boundary for someone.
For sure.
And then sometimes, of course, there are much bigger things in relationships. And you're not always going to get into the heavy topics, of course, right away when you meet someone. But I think you can get a feel for, are we on the same page on some of the smaller things? And then, is this even someone who I want to pursue a relationship in any capacity with, if we don't meet on these smaller things, or do we jive on, whatever. And then some of the bigger things, again, I think you can kind of set your own internal, like, I almost think of it as like a little like force field that I like engage sometimes.
Oh, I like that. Okay.
So it's like a little like shield, so I can be like, this is like, I'm protecting my energy or whatever, and I feel like I can set that, and that can be like a boundary that I don't want to talk about, but that I can just decide. And again, if I feel like maybe my boundaries have been stepped on, I can maybe revisit it, or even in the moment, just be like, hey, this isn't okay.
Yeah. I didn't like this or appreciate that.
Yeah. Sure. And this is a big enough thing. Yeah. In the moment, you might have to be like, no, we need to stop this. We need to whatever.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with that. It's hard, I think, especially when you first meet somebody, like you said, because you guys are filling it out. And so I think a lot of people, including myself, sometimes have that issue with expressing your boundaries just because there's like a conflict, So I think it's very interesting. What are some of the things that you do to make you feel confident within that moment, or being able to say it, whether it's during or after the fact?
I think it probably is always going to come back to like your relationship with yourself and working on that and feeling good and confident in that. Because then if you are steady in yourself, then even if I just read one of Brene Brown's books, and she kind of talked about like, if you know yourself, then it doesn't matter if you feel lost in other things. Like, you have the map that you need, basically, to navigate through that.
Yeah. And what's that book? Do you know the title?
It was her Atlas of the Heart book. It's talking about like emotions and naming emotions and being able to like how important language is in understanding our experience. And just like the nuances of that. And I feel like acting in a way that, like, that golden rule of like treating someone how you want to be treated, and like keeping your side of the street clean, and just like engaging from that place is going to set you up well for whoever you're meeting. And I think I told you this recently, but when you arrived first for our roommate, a couple weeks together, and when I came, I knew right away that you were someone who I would feel comfortable with, and that you were someone who was respectful and appreciative of other people, because you took up half of the closet and no more. You took up just half of the drawers. Like, you were very respectful in how you set up that situation. And so I was like, I knew that we would get along, because I was like, I already feel that she's someone who is going to understand boundaries, basically, because it was very clear. Like, I know what someone else would want in this situation, and you did it.
Yeah. And that, I think, was very interesting, because up until that point, I hadn't lived with any roommates ever.
Yeah.
And so I was just always used to being by myself. And my fear, of course, was when I got there that you'd be there first. And of course, I didn't know you at the time. And I was like, well, what if I have to tell them, like, hey, can you move your stuff over? Or, hey, can I put my things here? And that was my fear. Because like I said, I'd never lived with anybody before. And I was like, oh, this is going to be awkward. And then I got there and I was like, okay, she's not here yet. And then I was thinking, like, what if she has the same fear? Like, let me do things that would be helpful. Because we're going to be together. We were together for 6 weeks.
Just about, yeah.
Yeah. Some like first impressions are lasting, because, if I came in there, I'm like, ugh, okay, hey, I'm so-and-so. You mind moving your stuff over? It's already in my mind. It already makes it
It's already like a
awkward.
conflict. Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
And I'm like,
yeah.
so I totally get that. And
So
I'm
yeah,
glad
you
that you
already
appreciate that, because to me, it
approach the
wasn't,
situation. Yeah.
it wasn't a big deal, but I was like, if I felt that way coming in, I'm like, she might feel that same way. So, but it was nice. See, that's how you got to do. You got to treat people like you want to be treated, and it goes right back to what you said. So I appreciate that one.
Yeah, and I feel like for the most part, like I get what I give out.
Yeah.
Yes. So, and I think if you approach it kind of that way, and you expect people to honor your boundaries.
Yes.
Like why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't I do that to them?
Yeah.
And that's just sort of the inherent framework for your relationships. Then I think you're off to a good start.
I would agree with that. Okay, so have you ever been on a trip with a friend who does not respect your boundaries? And if so, how did you handle that?
Let's see. I think the biggest issues as far as maybe boundaries or just feelings of a trip are sort of like expectations and what each person wants.
Okay.
And so then if you're not talking about what's important to you before you go, then there's potential for some conflict of like, if I'm going to a tropical place, like I want to be on the beach, I want to be at the pool, I want to be relaxing, and I really honestly don't want to do anything else. And I'm telling you that, and I mean it.
I mean,
and so then if someone else is like, yeah, but I want to go on this hike, and I want to do this, and I want to go whatever, I want to go on the jet skis, and I want to blow, like, cool, great, like, that's fine. Those are all things that like you need to talk about beforehand, and things like, are you okay doing that by yourself? Communicating that.
Are you willing to compromise with that?
You're willing to compromise. I'm willing to compromise on this. It's like, okay, we're here for 5 days. Like 3 of the days, this is what I want, but 2 of the days we can do, whatever. Yeah, and you're okay doing your thing on your own for 1 day, so we're each, compromising.
I like that.
In general, probably the biggest thing for me is like sleep.
Okay,
and,
explain.
I know you understand this.
Yeah, of course I understand. I always need a good nap, okay? I like to sleep in. Come on now.
Exactly. Yeah, so it's like, if I can, again, it sort of depends on what the vacation is or what the trip is. If it's like a relaxing trip, if it's like we're trying to fit as much in as we can, go. But yeah, if there's something where it's like, okay, you want to get up early and I want to sleep in, or I want to go to bed earlier and you want to stay up late or whatever, like those can be issues that are,
I can see that.
If you're sharing a room.
Absolutely.
Potential conflicts there. And I don't know if that's like a boundary necessarily, but it could be,
I was going to say, for sure.
Like, somebody, you want to protect your energy, you want to be rested, whatever.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've been, I think in those situations a lot, actually, now that I'm like thinking about it, where somebody wants to sleep in or, later, or somebody wants to go to bed early. And I think it boils down to the respect, right? So whether or not you talk about it, you can sense if somebody's like dead tired, right? Yeah. And you're like, okay, I'm gonna go have breakfast, or I'm gonna go do something on my own, and maybe I'll text you, hey, I'm going so and so place, so you don't wake up and like, okay, she just left me, thank you. But right, but I think it's more so about communication, of course, whether it's text or voice, but communication and just respect in general, and I think that can save a whole lot of friendships.
Yes, absolutely. And keeping in mind that like everybody's going to have a different place that they're coming from, right? Like you live by yourself. I don't at this moment. So then understanding it's like, okay, well, you're used to having your routine and whatever works for you in your life. And then it's easy to just carry that over into whatever you're doing.
That makes perfect sense, yeah.
But if you were someone who was like, I fall asleep to the TV every night, like, I'm going to have a problem with that. Like, can we get like,
can we put that thing on mute?
Maybe? Or something, And there's things that I can do, like I wear an eye mask. I can
true.
There's things that we can compromise even within that, but understanding like where you're coming from and what is kind of working for your life beforehand, and then what you might bring into your travels.
That's a really good point right there. So I hope anybody who's listening kind of go rewind that one, because that was a really good point.
Yeah, because
Okay.
I mean, like a lot of times I'll fall asleep to like a meditation or like a
Yes.
noise,
Yes, yes,
like
yes.
ocean or something.
Hmm.
And I was like, I understand that not everybody's gonna want to have
I get that.
that, so I need to
The
come to the
birds in
trip
the background,
prepared
the wave.
for.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have like my mom got me one of those like eye mask
Hmm.
things that have the speakers on the side.
Love
Yeah, and I
that.
love,
Yeah.
especially on my layovers, if we
I
have like
bet.
a day over somewhere, trying to like
Yeah.
for red eye, I'm trying to sleep during the day for the
Yeah.
people who don't know what that is, and then I'm gonna work my shift later that afternoon or evening.
Yeah.
That's so because you get the
Mm.
hotel noise, you get the air conditioning, and so to have
Yeah.
something that's right against my ear that I can sleep with,
Oh, I
and
love
not
that.
obviously be like a um wireless something that
Yeah.
is like not safe to sleep in.
I
Yeah.
love that. That's a really good idea. I might have to look into that, because I know on some of these layovers, you got kids running through. You might have a baseball
Yeah.
team. So I'm like, okay, guys.
Yeah.
All
People,
right.
doors opening and closing,
Yeah.
those hotel doors
Come
slam
on.
shut.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
I would agree
So
with that. Yeah.
I
So,
can, from in my own way, come to
mhm,
the trip prepared for things like that.
and
And
I
then if
like that.
everybody does that,
Yeah.
again, you're doing pretty good.
But I feel like as you kind of talk about that, I
Mm-hmm.
think your friend group or people you decide to travel with
Mm-hmm.
really matter. In that idea, like,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, depending, like choosing wisely who you decide to travel with is a
Mm-hmm.
big
Mm-hmm.
deal. And as you kind of say
100%.
those things, I'm like, yeah, yeah, okay. You got to be smart about it, because there's some people that are the nicest people, the best people, but they are not
Yeah.
meant to travel with you.
Yeah.
And that's
And
the
it's true
nicest way I
for
can
like,
say that.
I mean, it's basically, I guess it depends on how you're doing the traveling, but sometimes this is going to
Okay.
be your roommate.
Well, yes. Yes, 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 yes.
Like
Yeah.
okay, yeah, maybe you have your own rooms, or maybe you're traveling
Yeah.
with a big enough group that you're split
Yes.
up in some
True.
way. But like you're gonna be living with this person for
Yeah.
at least a couple
Yeah,
days,
yeah.
and so being comfortable with them,
Mhm.
and again having like the same page on
Yes.
some things, or at least being willing to talk about it. And if this person isn't even willing to like talk about these things, or if they haven't
That's yeah.
even thought of it, like that's a red flag to me.
Yeah. I
It's like,
love you,
okay,
but
yeah,
you are not
you're
a
coming to this.
travel travel
We're
companion.
two separate people,
Yeah.
like yeah, we might not
Might
mesh.
not mesh well. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I agree with that. Yeah. And I mean, sometimes that's just kind of how it is. You can have, it might sound terrible, but I'm like, you have home friends, you have travel friends, you have,
Hmm.
I don't know,
Hmm.
whatever destination friends. And that's
Totally.
okay. You know what I mean? That's
Yeah.
perfectly
This is
fine.
the person I have my adventure trips with. This is the person I go and lay out at the beach with.
That's it, right?
Yeah.
And that makes sense. So,
Yeah.
I guess kind of talking about friend groups in general then, how
Hmm.
do you set boundaries with your friends specifically, even while you're at home? Not necessarily on a vacation, but like in general.
I mean, I think all the things that we've been talking
Yeah.
about, I think some of the biggest thing is again just like knowing what you want. Like that's
Yeah.
the biggest question that you can, I think, ask yourself in almost
Mhm.
any situation. Like, what do you want?
Yeah.
Getting clear on that, and then that like sort of makes everything else oh clearer. Like, okay, well, if this is what I want, then this is what I'm okay with, and this is what I'm not okay with.
Mhm.
And then you can see like, okay, maybe this is like a family member or a childhood friend that you've known for a really long
Mhm.
time, and as you change,
Yes.
it's harder to always pinpoint the patterns that have been existing.
Mhm.
And it's really easy to see people as they have been, so even if this person has changed, it can be difficult to stop that.
Yeah.
Allow people to grow. So one, getting clear about what you want, and
Mhm.
then starting to recognize any patterns that would result from discovering these things, I guess, about
Yeah.
yourself. And you can try and like, if I don't think anyone loves conflict. So
No.
there's, I think,
So what?
times or
I'm
ways
like, what?
where you can be like, you know what, I'm just gonna start not being available
Yeah.
every second to this person,
Yeah.
or by phone, or I'm only going to text, I'm not going to call anymore. Like
Mhm.
there's things that you can do on your end.
Yeah.
And then if maybe that works, maybe they get the message. And if it doesn't, then you are going to
You're
have
gonna have to
some of
say,
those
yeah.
conversations of like, hey, like this isn't working for me, this XYZ things. When you did this, I felt this.
Yeah. If this, then this.
Yeah, using your I statements.
Yeah.
Yes, I feel.
I feel.
Yeah.
Yes. And
Yeah.
that's funny
You were
that you
being
say that.
annoying.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was gonna say it's funny that you say that because that took me a while to start doing these I statements because I'm like,
Well,
you get on my
and do
nerves.
them
You have been.
correctly. Yeah, I feel that you are wrong. Like that's not what we meant by that.
I love
Yes.
it. But yeah, no, it's very real because it can that I feel like just kind of like going off on a tangent here for a second, but that
Mhm.
specific statement sometimes I feel like can change the entire course of the argument, not maybe an argument, but the conflict that you may feel like you're in.
Mhm.
You know, it could
Mhm.
it could actually take it to a place where you like, I can get through this entire thing and we actually can kind of joke while we go through it. Or, if it's more so like a you statement, like you do this and it blah blah blah,
Yeah.
whereas now the person may just cut it off and kind of bring it back to the
Right.
boundaries conversation. You're not going to even be able to get through that because now I feel, offended or, I'm in
Yeah.
defense mode. So forget
Yeah.
you and your boundaries. How about that? Like,
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And I mean, that kind of brings a good point. Like, we're talking a lot about, like, okay, I'm setting boundaries with someone else. But, like, what if someone else comes to me and says,
yeah.
hey, like, I don't like it that you sleep with the TV on or
Yeah.
whatever. It's so easy to feel like that immediate response is just like a defensiveness,
Yes.
and
Yes.
it's really hard to kind of break that. And so having maybe something like some tools
Mhm.
ready for you to be like, okay, when someone comes to me and with a criticism, with a critique, with a whatever, okay, I take, 5 deep breaths, I take 10 deep breaths.
Mhm.
I say, okay, like I want to hear you, but I'm kind of upset right now, so I'm going to go for a walk. Let's meet
Yeah.
20 minutes. Like
Yeah.
those are like some strategies that you can have
I love that. Yeah.
if you're the one who's infringed on someone's boundaries.
No, that makes sense because I mean, it's bound to happen at some point or another.
Mhm.
You're not the same person. You don't always know exactly what somebody feels, or
Mhm.
it's a learning process, and even friendships are relationships. You can't necessarily be hurt or offended every time.
Mhm.
Because I know I'm sure there's things that I may have done while we were traveling because we've gone to Mardi Gras
Mhm.
together.
Mhm.
We had a good time. We
Yeah, we
traveled
did.
before. We've even worked together. I
Yeah.
think once. And so
Yeah, I
it's
think this once. Yeah.
yeah, I was gonna say I think it was just once, but in those moments you learn, and as
Mhm.
you grow and develop a friendship, whether any kind of relationship, things will happen. So
Mhm.
I think those are great things. Now, have you ever regretted taking a trip with someone? You were actually on the trip with them. What did you do?
I don't think I've
Mhm.
had that experience.
Okay.
Luckily, so that's good.
Okay.
I there's definitely been times where it's like, ooh, I can see that we're not like
Yeah.
quite in sync, or
Yeah.
again, just like we want different things
Yeah.
from the trip, and maybe that wasn't communicated ahead of time. And so then in that time, those moments, I can be like, okay, this is why it's important to talk about like
Yes.
expectations before you go.
Yeah.
Sort of like reality check your trip. Be like, okay, what do we each want to have happen? What are the like non-negotiables?
Mhm.
What are the things we're willing to compromise on?
Yeah.
And I mean, sometimes it can sound silly to have that like ahead of time because you're like,
I don't
we're
think so.
going on whatever.
Yeah.
Of course, we all want to be doing the same things, but
Yeah.
I mean, even like there can be some hot buttons like money
Yes.
in traveling, where it's like,
Yes.
okay, like so and so wants to go to the grocery store and have groceries and only eat out once a day, and
Mhm.
so and so wants to eat out every
Every
meal.
meal. Yep. Yeah.
And so those things are important to
Mhm.
talk about, because then that gets into like, it's not just, well, I really wanted to like relax and I didn't feel like I
Yeah.
relaxed as much. It's like, okay, well, this is like potentially impacting other things in my life then, if
Yeah.
it's like finances or whatever.
No, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, and I was gonna say, like, as you all these things that you mentioned, I'm like, yeah, I've gone through that, right? So
Yeah.
it's just funny, and I think that's why I really enjoy having you on because we've actually traveled together, so I can
Yeah.
like kind of go back and think, I'm like, yeah, actually, even if we even if we didn't necessarily say those things, I think you and I are very good at kind of understanding each other's boundaries, and we can
Yeah.
read each other. I think, which is really good. So I think
Yeah. We've known each other a
um,
long time now.
for
That,
sure,
yeah.
for
Yeah.
sure, and I think that's something else. Like having somebody who is and what is it? I want to say environmentally aware maybe
situationally aware.
Situationally aware. Thank you. Gotta use those words, right?
Use your CRM skills, Erica.
Right. I'm trying to remember, right? So I feel like, but that's a real thing when you have somebody who can see what's happening outside of their own bubble, right? Who can understand
totally.
and who can feel and empathize with you, rather than just concerned about what they're doing only, right? Oh, well, I'm going to, I'm like, it's a us trip. Okay. I'm like, we can do things, so I think it's very interesting. And that goes again into how you choose somebody to travel with,
Yeah.
So
I think it has to do, like, you can approach these boundary conversations as a very, like, wow, like, let's make sure we're on the same page and talk about everything and what we want to do every day. But most of the time, when I am talking to someone, I'll just be like, what are your hopes and dreams for the trip? And I just like talk about it in a more like, and that sounds like more fun and more casual than like let's set expectations. Like that just sounds like
don't like management
boring
things.
And hard and potentially conflict there. So I think there's some like connotation in that word even. That can be kind of loaded for people. And so if you can approach it as, you can approach it in a different way. And it can work really well. Like I don't make resolutions. I make like dreams for the year list, because the resolution to me has like a more negative connotation. So I call it something else. Same thing.
Smart.
But
And it's funny, I kind of want to go back to choosing who you travel with, how to choose who you travel with. So as you were going through that, I'm like, okay, so people we were talking about who are situationally aware, people who are maybe a little, what's the word? You just said something and it like lit this little light above my head, and then now of course I can't remember. But okay, let's kind of go into that. So what specific things do you look for in a travel buddy?
I think, well, of course, like the places that we want to go could be like a major thing. Like if you want to go to Ireland with me, and that's number one on my list, like, okay, well, I'm going to find somebody else.
At work.
And then I think someone who I have to be really comfortable with them. Like I'm not just gonna like a casual friend or work friend. Like, hey, we're going on this like road trip, blah 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 blah. Like, I'll catch up with you later.
If you happen to be there and I happen to be there, I'll meet you there.
Exactly. I will meet you for lunch.
That's hilarious.
There. Yeah. So I mean, I think I'm pretty aware of who I would be comfortable enough with to travel. And honestly, it's not that many people.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's probably a short list.
It's a short list.
Yeah.
And that's not bad, but just like again, knowing what I am looking for in a trip, and then feeling like, okay, like this person, we know each other so well that I feel like we match in many of these areas. And so even if it's not 100% match, like it probably is never. I was going to say, match. It's like any relationship where it's going to be like you want someone who's a little different than you.
I was going to say, like, it gets boring otherwise.
Try different things. Like, hey, I never would have like checked out that hike or whatever. But yeah, just someone who you can talk to about these things. I think that's big too. Because again, if you don't feel like you can talk about it, like, oh, well, that's a red flag.
And trust. I think there's a big aspect of having somebody that you trust. And that kind of goes into knowing them, but really trusting somebody, because I feel like you get to learn a whole lot about a person when you travel with them. So not only are you actually figuring out how they respond under pressure and stress, you're figuring out how they spend their money, you're figuring out the things that they like, what they like to do, how they talk to you. I mean, you get to really know a person. And I feel like in a lot of relationships, people, I don't want to say it terrible, but I mean, it could make or break a relationship sometimes. I feel like, I've traveled with some people and I'm like, you know what? You are not someone, I mean, and going back to my you statements, right? You are not somebody I want to travel with. But no, I mean, it's just, it's interesting because you start to see them in a different light rather than if you, you were talking about maybe working with somebody or even knowing somebody, even somebody that you may have known for a couple years, but you haven't really, spent a lot of time with, I feel like
Mm-hmm.
traveling will expose a lot of things for you.
Yeah, because traveling is stressful,
It is
like you're
absolutely stressful.
tired,
Mm-hmm.
it's weird time zones,
Yep.
maybe it's languages that you don't
Yep.
speak, it's hard.
How
And so,
tolerant are you of other, cultures or,
yeah,
things like that? Or are you willing to learn or eat or see or
right,
try?
exactly,
Yeah.
try the food, yeah,
Yeah.
totally. So that's all big, and I feel like was something you said had sparked. I went on this trip with my boyfriend and some of his friends
Mm-hmm.
a few summers ago, and one of the friends in the group was like, they didn't have anyone else to go with really, and so like
Okay.
we had included them in our group, but they were like definitely the odd one out,
Mm-hmm.
and so I think even kind of understanding that or feeling like doing something out of obligation or guilt or like, wow, like
Yeah.
they don't have anyone, like we have to like include them, like that gets
Yeah.
kind of sticky.
Yeah.
And then it ended up like, yeah, like they kind of freaked out about a couple things and
Yeah.
they were like so mad. I mean, I had like left the trip the same day that this had happened, so I didn't have
Oh,
to
okay.
experience any of that
Okay.
personally, but just like the fallout from it of like,
Yeah. That could be
like it was
rough.
like a concert, and after
Okay.
the show
Yeah.
was over, like the rest of the group just made it back to the hotel, and this other person had like been trying to like wait for them, and then had like gotten
Oh
lost and didn't
no.
understand the transit. So it was like
Oh
kind of
no.
really stressful.
Yeah.
But there's things where it's like, okay, well, come to the trip knowing some of these things about
Mm-hmm.
yourself. Like, I think again, being self-aware.
Yeah.
Like I
That's a
came to the
big
trip being
thing.
like, hey, portions of this trip I'm going to be by myself
Yeah.
in Europe, which I haven't really done before. What's
Mm-hmm.
going to make me feel comfortable doing that?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to pay to have my cell phone plan. Yeah, it's more expensive
Absolutely.
than I would like, but I'm really not going to be comfortable if I don't have that.
Yeah.
And so setting yourself up for success in situations like
Mm-hmm.
that, and then if hopefully everybody is doing that, then
Yeah. I would
everyone's safe.
100% agree.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what is your biggest pet peeve while traveling though?
Good question.
Yeah,
I
let's
don't
see.
know.
What is it?
Yeah,
I want the
I
juicy
know.
details.
Yeah. They're probably nothing that juicy.
I know.
I mean, it's probably something to do with sleep or,
Okay.
impacting sleep or just, yeah, I think I've mentioned a couple times like falling asleep with the TV on. And
Yeah.
so I
Yeah.
think that's probably going to be one up there of just
One of
of
the pet peeves.
having the TV on all the
Yeah.
time is kind of like a pet peeve of mine because I really
Mm-hmm.
don't in my
Yeah.
life. I
Same.
don't watch a lot of TV. I just have it on.
Mm-hmm.
And so then if it's just on all the time, that just kind of like drives me a little bit crazy. I
Yeah.
start to feel kind of anxious.
Oh, yeah.
And there's people who are like, well, like they
I
live
need
alone and they like
noise
the
or yeah.
background noise,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. I get that.
that's a thing and that's
Yeah.
fine. But then
Mm-hmm.
when you have those two together, it's like,
Yeah.
ooh,
It
like,
has to be a compromise. It has to be
yeah,
something. Yeah. I
okay, the
totally
TV goes
get
off
that.
at this time
Yeah.
or whatever. Yeah,
Yeah.
it can be on for a little while, but not, not
Yeah.
forever. No.
And I think people have to remember compromise in every relationship is necessary. And
Mm-hmm.
on every aspect, no matter if you're traveling or not, compromise is a huge situation. It's just
Yeah.
about respecting what other people want, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's see. What are some of the details that you need hashed out before you even decide to go on a group trip or before it starts, rather?
Yeah, I think coming up with like your, I don't know that to-do list is quite the right word, but just like what
What you want
what
to
do you want the
see? What
trip
do you
to
want to accomplish?
be?
Yeah.
Yeah, like what do you want to do? Like how much time do you want to spend
Spend
relaxing?
it
How
up.
much
Yeah.
time do you want to do excursions? What are our
Mm-hmm.
budgets for those
Yeah.
things? Food, same thing. Like,
Mm-hmm.
are we okay?
Grocery
Are we okay
store,
splitting up?
restaurant.
That's a
Say
big
again.
thing too. Like, are you okay splitting up?
Oh,
Like,
split it. Yeah, 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 for sure.
yeah, like you go do it. Are you okay doing things on your own? Am I
Mm-hmm.
okay doing things on my own?
Yeah.
Those are, I think, good things too. And yeah, just kind of deciding, yeah, like what are your non-negotiables
Mm-hmm.
and what are the things you're willing to compromise on, and probably budget are
Yeah.
like the big things.
I would say so. And it's funny because my next question was, do you like take time for yourself while you're traveling? And I'm like, actually, you have
100%.
answered
Yeah.
that a couple times for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes,
Yeah.
and thank you.
Yeah. Need
I love
that.
you like, yeah,
Need
and
that
that's
Need that all the time. Yeah.
I love it. Cause I think sometimes when I travel, I'm so used to like just kind of staying with the group. I'm somebody who went from like super type A, like this is the plan, I have to stick to it, blah, 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 to now I just go with the flow. And I want to say thank you for this job
Mm-hmm.
because I think the job is the reason that I've
Oh
changed
my
so
gosh,
much.
lessons in non-attachment.
Oh my God. Right. And so I'm just like, yeah, whatever.
Daily lessons
Yeah.
in non-attachment.
Oh my God. I'm like, whatever you want to do, I'm with it. Right. But there's sometimes like, even for me,
Cool.
even
I'm
though,
exactly where Chris
yes,
scheduling needs me to be. Yeah.
great. They know
That's
exactly how
all
to
I
get
have
to me.
control
Right. Yeah.
over.
Right. But I mean,
Yeah, they
like,
can call
even
me.
when I've traveled with friends and I'm like, yeah, whatever. And then in the moment, I'm like, listen, I'm exhausted. I'm like, I just can't.
Yeah.
Or, if they're like, I
Yeah.
want to go to the beach. I have one friend and she loves the sun. And I love it, but I'm like, I can't. Like, I can't fall asleep outside. I don't need that in my life. And I'm like, by all
Hi.
means, have fun at the beach.
I'm
I will be
possibly the
right
whitest
here.
person you know.
Listen,
Yeah.
it's fine
I
to get a
need
tan and
shade.
all.
I
Yeah,
need shade.
right?
Yeah. I'm gonna be a
And
lobster. I'm
I'm
gonna
like,
be
I
a
burned my
lobster.
face all
Yeah.
up one time. I was like, this is just not it for me. Okay. I'm like,
Yeah.
listen. So now
Yeah.
that's one of the
I
things
get
that
it.
we've kind of learned as we go through. So she'll go to the pool or whatever, and I'm
Yeah.
hanging out in the room and I'm like, I'm gonna take me a nap, okay? so, so that's just
Yeah.
how it works. And I
Yeah.
think it's funny.
That's
You
good.
like I said, you learn.
Yeah, and I think it's
Yeah.
becoming more confident, like in yourself, and
Yes.
becoming more confident in like
And
what you want. And sometimes I felt sometimes where it's like, oh well, like I'm kind of tagging along on this trip, and like maybe I'm not paying for the hotel, or I'm not paying for whatever,
yeah,
and I don't always get as much say then, right? And
I
then
get that.
that's like that's a personal thing, like
Yeah.
that's a me thing that I have to work through.
Yeah.
So then that's my work.
That's a me thing.
Um,
I like
so
that.
it's feeling like, yeah,
Mhm.
that's not them. That's not their problem. That's my
That's
feeling
me.
about whatever.
Yeah.
Um, so that feels like, no, I do have a voice. You can't
Yeah.
advocate for what I like, whatever,
Yeah.
whatever I need. I'm allowed to say,
Mhm.
even if we end up compromising, even if we end up doing the thing
Yeah.
that the other person wanted, at least being able to talk about it and be
To
like,
be
okay, well, then
explicit.
next
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. So, what I want to do before I wrap us up is I
Yes,
just
ma'am.
want to ask you if you could give some advice to some folks out there who may be thinking about taking a trip with their friends or who want to have like a girls'
Mm-hmm.
trip, and they're
Yeah.
just not sure. Or, they've done it and they've had some issues, and how could they maybe try it again and change some things? Any advice for them?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think just talking,
Yeah.
being willing and able to talk about
Yeah.
all these things is, I think, the biggest thing. And before you get into the situation where it's like, and I didn't even get to see
Yeah.
whatever,
Yes. Yes.
like it's too late at that point.
Yeah.
Someone's already mad. And then having check-ins regularly along the trip.
Yes. 1000%.
Yeah.
And during the trip, for sure. For
So
sure.
it's like, okay, during the trip, okay, these are the things we talked about. Like, are we still feeling like this? Is this still important? And then we're here. Before we go to bed, we kind of like talk about the day and like
I like that.
highlights
Yeah.
of the day. And then we talk about like what we want the next day. Okay, tomorrow we want these things. And just
Yeah.
kind of like do
Always
that
on the
every
same page.
day, which sounds like kind of a drag. But if you do it again in like a fun, like, wow, this was great. We did this. What's the
Really
most exciting
enjoyed.
thing you want
Yeah.
to do tomorrow or
Yeah.
whatever? What's the highlight? What do you want your highlight to be tomorrow?
Yeah.
Of course, leaving room for life, but
Yeah. Yeah, of course. Gotta eat. I know a lot of times, I think that's probably my pet peeve is people don't like pencil in times to eat. Now, I love a meal. Okay. I'm like, wait, hey, did we talk about lunch?
Yeah.
Are we going to have breakfast? What are we doing? Dinner? Come on. Snack?
But then have those built-in breaks of like a
Yes.
meal where it's like, yeah, we're
Yes.
sitting for an hour and a half, 2 hours.
Yes.
And we're like, it's a rest time. It's a hydrating time. It's of course, food.
Check-in.
And that can serve multiple purposes.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Well, yes. Well, I appreciate you for coming on, and I'm so happy that I got to introduce
you
you
for
to the
having
Next Stop
me.
Nonstop family, and we will definitely be seeing her again. Okay,
Yep.
guys.
Absolutely. Yes. I know. I can't wait. All right. I love you.
Thank you so much for tuning in today. I really appreciate you guys rocking out with me. I hope you got something from this episode, and I hope it makes your next girls trip a little bit easier. So Until we meet again, I want to wish you healthy minds and happy travels.